Hi everyone, welcome to Figma Part 2 Leveling Up. This is the second installment in my quick Figma series on teaching this tool and what can be done with it. So in the previous video, I started off by talking about the basics of Figma, and in this one, I'm going to show you some more advanced features and how we can take that very bare bones Spotify that we created in the first video and sort of upgrade it using these new features. And so here I'll cover styles, components, auto layout effects, and maybe a couple other things along the way. Let's jump right in. So if you remember from the last video, this is where we left off. I had this like goal in mind of what screen I wanted to make, and then I used the basic tooling to set up sort of this like wireframe structure. And now I'm going to go in and make it look more like the real thing. So usually when I'm designing screens, I start with a grid layout. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out Spotify's grid layout and then apply it to my own to make sure everything is aligned properly. So what I did here was I took that screenshot, I framed it by doing right click and then frame selection. And now since I have it framed, I can go over into this right side panel and add a layout grid. Usually on mobile, you'll have an 8-pixel grid. So the first one that shows up is 10 pixel. We're going to change it to 8. And then I'm also going to add a column because I want to know what the margins are that Spotify uses. So I'll use one column, and you can see that the margins here are 16 pixels. See here you can tell because everything lines up well on that 16 pixel line. And now we've sort of like built out Spotify's grid system. So in order to use it on this other screen that I have, and also in subsequent screens if I want to keep building, I'm going to click this like little 4 dots where you hover over it says style, and then I can add it to my grid styles, and I'm going to call it Spotify's grids. So I create the style and it shows up here as Spotify's grids. So then if I go to my own screen here, I click on the frame, I can go to the layout grid area on the right side panel, click the little 4 dots, and there it is, Spotify's grids. And all I have to do is add it and it clicks it right in. So now what I do with a grid layout, I have to make sure that everything is aligned on these margins. So to do this, I wish I knew a better way, but basically what I'm going to do is just snap everything to those edges accordingly. And so I usually just do this manually. Takes a little bit of time, but not too bad. But we're just trying to ensure that everything along the edges is lined up. All of this was centered in the prior video, so I don't have to worry about it. See here, this looks a little bit wacky because it's not all lined up on that left side, so we're gonna line that up. I'm also going to line up this little toggle switch to the edges. And then here you can see even on these little components, the heart and the more icons are not lined up. So we're just gonna move this to the edge. And instead of doing that for every single one, I'm just going to copy and paste them all. So let's do that. 3, 4. And then I want these all to have like an even spacing in between for the uniformity. So I highlighted them all. And you can see in this bottom right corner of the selected components, I can click on these 3 lines and it immediately snaps them to the right distance. And you can go here and see what that distance is. Here it says it's 9, but I actually want it to be 8. So I'm going to change it to 8. And now that's all set up. Additionally, down here, you can see that this is pretty much lined up correctly. These are 1 pixel off. No, 1 second. Here we go. And then if we go over here, you can see this one's a little bit off. So I will snap it to that edge. And this is pretty much good for this grid layout. I like this. So now that we've handled the layout, I'm going to hide the grids by clicking Control G. And now I will dive right into how to do the colors. So what we're looking at here, I'm going to start with the background. We've got this like blue to gray to black gradient. And this looks like a little bit complex only because I haven't figured out in Figma how to do a 3-point gradient. So what we're actually going to do today is 2 linear gradients overlaid with each other. And so how I'm going to view this is the top portion here will be 1 gradient, and then it will fade into another like overarching gradient that goes from this colored portion to black. So to do this, I'm going to start with a rectangle. This will be the colorful gradient. And as you can see, it's sort of a gray solid. So if I go to the fill section down here and I bring up the color picker, you can see it's solid and it's gray, which makes a lot of sense. But in this drop-down menu, I can also choose between all these different types of gradients or an image. So I'm going to go with linear gradient for this first part. As you can see, for Spotify's gradient, it kind of goes like in this diagonal pattern. So I will drag the anchor points into the corners of that shape. And then I'm just going to use the eyedropper to grab the right colors. So in this top corner, we'll click that one. And then in this bottom corner, we'll take this gray color, hopefully. Maybe we'll make it a little bit lighter because hard to tell right now. There we go. Make it a little bit grayer, actually. Nice. Okay, so now we've got that like underlying gradient going. And I'm going to now add on the overlay gradient, which is going to go from color to black. And the cool thing about Figma is that you can add multiple layers of color onto a single shape by going to this fill section on the right side, hitting the plus button, and there you have it. Another one is added. I can go in here and modify the color to be black. I can modify this color to be black. And then obviously I want my top one to be transparent so that you can see it kind of like following that gradient line. And I like this. So I'm going to actually send it to the back so that it hides behind everything else. And then I'm going to change the frame color to be black. There we go. All right, so now that that's handled, I'm going to do also this bottom area right here. There we go. Nice. All right, now that that's all handled, we've sort of got like the colors all set up. I like this. Oh, we can do these ones too. This looks like in this like search bar and the filter button, it's more of like a white overlay with like a translucent effect. So we're going to do that. I will go with F, which is white in hexadecimal codes. And then I will go to about, I'm going to guess like 15%, maybe a little more than that, 20. That looks pretty good. So we can go over here as well, F20. And then we'll change these values to be, I'm guessing like C maybe. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. So things are slowly coming together. Next thing, you can see all the text is black, which I don't think is accurate. Obviously, all the text is white, or mostly all white. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click the whole frame, and instead of going through each text box to change it to white, I can come down here and see selection colors, see the whole frame is selected. So anything that is this pure black 0000000, I'm going to change to F, which makes them all white. That's a really easy way if you ever want to change a theme color. Might as well select all of the frames in your space and then use the selection color area to manage that in a better way. It makes your workflow so much faster. All right, so let's jump into the next part. This is really exciting. There's this feature of Figma that is sort of magical. It is called auto layout, and I'm going to show you how to use it to make buttons. So what we're going to do is we're going to recreate this green button, but not in the basic way that I did in the first video. So in the basics video, if you remember, I created a rectangle. I rounded the edges using the radius feature. And then I typed up some text and threw it in the middle, and that was it. But instead, what I can do is use auto layout to manage the button text such that if I wrote something besides shuffle play, it would still maintain the same dimensions and just grow with the text size. So you can think of this, if you're a CSS person, as a little bit like Flexbox, where it like kind of wraps around accordingly. But I'm just going to go ahead and do that for both this top button and this bottom button. So to make this first button, the green one, I'm going to click T for text, and then I'm going to type out shuffle play. And since it's white, I'm going to go with white, and I'm actually going to make the tracking around like 8% because that's a little bit more accurate to what they're doing. And then I'm also going to change this to medium. There we go. Okay, so now in order to use auto layout, 10, there we go. I'm going to click Command G, which is the same as doing group in the right click menu. And now that I've grouped it, it's shown up with this like auto layout feature on the right side bar here. And so what I can do is I can click the plus sign here, which adds an auto layout. And now to see how auto layout properties affect this frame that I've just created, I'm going to add a fill. And my fill is going to be the color, the background color of the button. So this like cute little green color, Spotify green. And now we can play around with some auto layout properties to make it look just like Spotify's. So what we're going to do, I'm going to center this text because it makes it easier, is we're going to play around with this little guy right here. So what you're looking at is this middle box area aligns where the text is in the auto layout component. So I want it straight in the middle. Obviously, that's how it works on this button. And then what I also want to keep in mind is that these numbers denote the padding on the button. So what I want to do is sort of just like make it mirror Spotify. So I'm guessing this is probably around like 8 maybe. Yeah. And then we can go 8 on the bottom too. And then on the sides, this is probably around like much more than that, 48 maybe. And then we can try 48 on the other side. See, oh wait, maybe that's too much. Oh no, that was good, perfect. And now I can go in the radius again like we did before, go at 100, and that's pretty accurate. I'm gonna go with 12 actually on the top and bottom though. Yeah, nice. So now what happens is if I want to change the text in here to just shuffle, for example, it auto resizes, which is really helpful in a lot of different ways. The next thing you can do once you've made something like a button is you can go into this upper menu and click this thing called Create Component. And what that does is now that you've created this component, you can reuse it over and over again for any button on screen that looks like this. And how you would do that is you would go into the Assets tab over here. You can drop down, and here is this Shuffle Play button. You can drag and drop it wherever you want. You can double click it to modify the text. Oops, modify text. Can't type. And now you have this like reusable component that can be used anywhere in your interface throughout your project, which is kind of handy. All right. So what I'm actually going to do is delete this one and drag on one of these components, and I'll center it in the middle. I will go about 16, yeah, that looks good, 16 pixels from that text. And I'm actually gonna fix this up a little bit. Sure, that looks fine. See here, perfect. And then now let's make this other one. So like we just did, I'll create a text box. I'll write add songs. This text looks a little bit smaller, so I'm gonna go size like 10 maybe. And then I'll do a tracking of 10 as well. And then I'll change it to white because that's what it is. That looks pretty accurate. Now, going through it again, I hit Command G to group. This adds an auto layout property to the sidebar. I click the plus button. And then again, since this one just has a stroke on the outside, I scroll down and I can see this little property called stroke. I add a stroke to it. I'm gonna make this about like C, nope, just kidding, 5, there we go. And now I can like see how the auto layout properties affect my new button. So I think this looks like it's about 4 up and down. On the sides, maybe that's like 16. No, more than that, 24 maybe. Yeah, 24. And then again, the radius, Spotify is very rounded. So this is actually a little bit more than 28. Yeah, and there you have it. And then again, I can component it and it shows up in that Assets tab. And now if I want to use it in place of this like more basic button that I created earlier, I can just drag it on from the side and there it is. And I can check the distance between by highlighting both of them. I change it to 16 because that's my standard spacing. And there you have it. We are getting there, people. All right. Now for the next part. I'm actually just going to leave this toggle the way it is because I think it looks pretty close. I'll just change the color of it by eyedropping. So that's pretty easy. And other than that, let's see, what else can we change here? I think this looks pretty good. Yeah, I like what this is right now. And so, like I mentioned, I think I overviewed everything I said I would overview. Styles, check. Remember how we added styles? We went and we found these little dots and we were able to add whatever styles we wanted to from any of those little 4-point dots, whether it's a text style or a color style or whatever else. Components, we use this upper button, I guess, on this nav bar to create a component, and it showed up in the Assets tab. Auto layout we use to create these buttons and make them so that they were all adjustable. And then some effects, we're using gradients. So other ones that you can play around with in your own free time are in the Effects tab down here, which there's drop shadows, there's layer blur, which is great for a lot of iOS type of design. You've got background blur, which is also great. And then like shadows are obviously really helpful for, especially for desktop styling. So that's about comprehensive. I think that if you have questions, you can feel free to Slack me about them, or I can also host an office hours period, whatever would be most helpful. But another thing I would like to plug is Figma has just the absolute best product documentation I've ever seen. And they have it both on their own website where it's written up. They also have it on a YouTube channel and they make amazing videos. And so if you're curious about some of the more unique features of Figma, I would highly recommend you go and check those out. It's how I learned Figma. It's how a lot of my friends learned Figma. And I think it's a tool that's really worth your time. So stay tuned. And for the next video, I will go over some really cool plugins that can make this workflow of filling in the content and getting the icons a little bit quicker. And I think they'll be really helpful in your workflow. So catch you in a bit.